right, everybody, it's Saturday night. Welcome back. You're listening to America Now. Barb Adams live here with you. Thanks so much for joining me. Well, I've got 3 great topics for you tonight, so I hope you stay for the entire show. But if you do miss any part, you can listen to this or any of my shows in their entirety on my website, radioamericanow.com, under archives. Well, I'm another year older today, perhaps not a whole lot wiser, but in the now 6 years I've been doing the show, it's been my hope to try to set an example of what being in service means. You see, I don't get paid for doing the show. I do it out of my love for trying to inspire others through my guests and interviews to go out and be the best you can be, to extend others when they need a helping hand, to smile when nobody else is smiling, to keep believing that the world really is a great place and that love and peace will prevail. Our founding fathers and those whose names we may never know, they knew what being in service meant, oftentimes sacrificing their lives and fortunes to help create and preserve this great American experiment we all call home. We live in a world that seems to promote and reward greed, corruption, and self-centeredness. But I, for one, believe differently. I know the world to be one of grace, love, and beauty. And I know you all have the potential to be bright, shining examples to others. I ask that you, too, find your way of being in service to others and to this country, because all of us and America need you now. Joining me this first hour, as always, is author and former statewide prosecutor and Deputy Attorney General of New Jersey, John J. Higgins. Together, we form the Nonpartisan Practical Solutions for America and ask you join us here on air each week and on Facebook to discuss the challenges facing present-day America. If you'd like to call in and join tonight's discussion, the number is 800-259-5791. Again, that's 800-259-5791. John, how you doing?
I'm good, birthday girl. How are you?
Doing fine. Sitting here in service like you, sir. You know very well how to be in service. Talk about that, John. What being in service means.
Well, I think that's the whole point of our existence on the earth, at least from what I've learned. I don't think that it's a matter of gaining more toys or, building more things on the planet. If you think of God as like an almighty being or whatever created everything, all of this stuff down here is dust anyway, and it all disappears over time. It's what we do with other people that is the most important thing that we do. And I really believe that, there's a sense of, at least for me, I feel like my spirit grows when I help other people.
Yeah, and that's truly, I think, what this is all about. It's at the deepest sense, service arises from deep within that connection. There is a strong spiritual aspect to all of this, and it's never concerned about whether one gains recognition, fame, or money from helping others. In fact, most of the time, those in true service don't sit around and they don't try to draw attention about this,
Absolutely, because, the idea of being, flattered or honored on this planet, I don't think really matters much.
Right.
And, I do believe in, God's will, and I learned a long time ago that God's will for me is not necessarily to my benefit. Sometimes I am supposed to be a servant, and I'm supposed to help people and pull them up and, try to encourage them and get them through rough times. I mean, anybody can be friends when everything is going wonderfully. It's, will you roll up your sleeves and get in the ditch with somebody and help get them out?
Yeah, and it does mean sacrifice sometimes, and it doesn't mean you're going to get wealthy. In fact, you may lose your wealth. You may have to give up things to help others.
Absolutely, and I think if you look through history is replete with people who have done that. I mean, you and I talk a lot about the founding fathers and whatever. I mean, it wasn't very easy for them to just, cut some kind of deal with the king. He's used to cutting deals. And, everybody else in the country be damned and, move them up into some kind of royalty and make them the Earl of Jersey City. But you know what I'm saying?
Wow, that sounds like a good place to be right now. Sorry. Sorry, Jersey City.
Well, they have earls and dukes and whatever, all kinds of stuff over there.
Yeah, but they're not the same kinds, I don't think.
Well, I mean, if the country would have gone otherwise, I don't know that we wouldn't have had that, when you think about it.
Well, yeah, when you think about it, Washington himself, he could have been king had he wanted to. And even Washington turned down a salary which was huge in those days, $25,000 a year. That's a lot way back when. But he really wanted to set an example by serving the nation as a pure public servant. He finally took the money, but, he would not allow them to make him king or any other title they wanted to give him. He just said, please just call me Mr. President.
Right, which is kind of bizarre because the rest of the founding fathers were trying to get away from that, but they were going to do it to George, and thank God that man had a level of humility that was really uncommon. I think King George III said that, if Washington did not become king, he was one of the greatest men who ever lived.
Right, yeah. It was even when Washington died, wasn't it Napoleon back there in France set aside 10 days of official mourning for Washington? That's how greatly he was respected around the world.
Yeah, well, Napoleon obviously didn't follow in his example.
No, but he did like him. He thought he was a great man. He got the idea in theory.
Well, Napoleon was short. I mean, he's notorious for his own ego.
Well, I think that's where we get Napoleon complex from, right?
Absolutely. And, he was in a country too that was fighting to have liberty, and then they lost it. They broke free of the king, and then they ended up with an emperor, and that should just show us as an example of how easy it is to get right back into the same cycle that had been before.
Yeah, and that's the problem when we have this thing called ego, John. We all are taught, that ego serves its purpose, but to get to that higher level, we must all transcend this. And as you mentioned earlier, this being in service truly does have this deep spiritual basis to it.
Yes, and I think that almost every religion really, has a large component of that they're trying to set the example for people, to get closer to, a higher power, God, whatever you want to call it, and that is done by, some sort of self-sacrifice.
Yeah, and, even Jesus talked about, remember, with, what was it, the alms? That it was, people that were giving the alms to the poor, those that made sure they got the recognition for, hey, look at me, I'm giving the alms to the poor. Hey, good thing, He didn't criticize them, but he also said, their just reward wasn't going to be in heaven. It was immediate, that they got something there. It fed their ego is what he was talking about. But that those who were giving and, just giving, and nobody else really noticed, and they didn't care that nobody noticed. For them, right. The true award came.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I say, I think that once you really get in touch with it, there's a sense of self that gets stronger, and as the ego gets eased out of us, we become better people and try to do more. Yeah, we do. Both ways are giving, but when it's from the ego, it's not quite the same. Better to have ego removed. All right, America Now will continue after the break with more from John Higgins, myself, about service. I couldn't even think of it there. I lost it. All right, we'll be back. All right, everybody, welcome back. John Higgins joining me as always this first hour. We're talking about being of service. And, John, there's a lot of people that really do want to be of service, but it certainly seems like many of our politicians these days have forgotten what being of service and being a public servant truly means. Oh, absolutely. I think that the message has gotten lost. That, being elected to an office is that you're supposed to be a servant, and you are not a king, you are not an earl, you're not a duke, you're supposed to do what's right for the country. And, over the decades, I think that it's become, more and more hostile, and, they're now like playing football teams, we're the Republicans, you're the Democrats, and, I'm not going to let go of that as an identity, and mess with you. I'm not going to pass any of your laws because you have your name on it.
Yeah, exactly. And meanwhile, we all get penalized for it instead of them. The flags get thrown, and it's against the people. And that's the whole point, is to service before self truly is the essence of what it means to be in public service. Put those personal interests beside, including party interests. It's supposed to be serving the greater good first, no matter what the organization is. The act of serving others is the core value that strengthens communities and our nation.
Yes, absolutely. And when you think of how the government started, it was like they would come together from all over the country, where it wasn't that you hopped on a jet plane to get there. It would take you days, weeks, to get there, and you assembled for a certain period of time. You did the country's business, and then you went home. It wasn't that you went to Washington, to become, part of the paparazzi crew, and to be rubbing elbows with the world's wealthy as some kind of festival. It was really about going to Washington to do work.
Yeah, they've become celebrity. You're right. It's like they've taken on this celebrity stance, and they forget that they're there to serve others again. And, it's really, this responsibility is quite an honor. It's a precious honor that's been bestowed upon them by people entrusting entrusting what we want in these people. And for them, and there are people out there, obviously, there are many out there that do try to serve and do a good job of it. But, unfortunately, the local, state, and national levels, so much of what we hear, unfortunately, is all this negative. And this negative has taken this country totally the wrong direction.
Right. I mean, it's frightening to me when the president of the Senate says that he's not going to do anything but be focused on making sure that the president doesn't get reelected. I mean, that's really not the job. If you want to do that, then be the Republican National Committee guy. But you shouldn't be, the president or speaker or whatever they are, the majority leaders or the minority leaders in the Congress and the Senate. That's really not the people who get harmed. It wasn't the president. It's the general public that get hurt when you do not do your job.
Mm-hmm. That's it exactly, when they talk about gridlock, or when they decide, we're not going to pass this bill, as you were talking about before, or that bill because it's this party sponsored this one, or so-and-so sponsored this one. The blame games, the pointing, the polarization. This has got to end. It's beyond ridiculous at this point. And again, we need to stand up and be strong and say enough is enough. Enough voices have to come together and say we've had it. We've absolutely had it. If none of you are willing to stand up there in Congress or whatever and do your job, well, then you all have to go.
Well, and I think it's gotten perverted in another way, is that, the goal now is to be continually reelected. So there's all these things called gerrymandering, where they change the borders of, the voting districts so that these people, have a better shot at getting, reelected time after time. And then, then they become, senator or congressman for life, which was never the point or the purpose of that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, this was not a career. Again, it was of service. Totally different. But you're right. When they redistrict things, we had that happen here in Colorado. And one of the senators here recently, because of redistricting, he lost. And he was a very popular senator. He actually did a lot of good. But the Koch brothers came in, and their money influenced a lot of things, and here we go. It's these corporations, and we talk about this constantly, John, that further confound the birth and growth of these corporations.
Right, and what it's become is that it's a race for the money. I mean, we talk about that all the time too. I mean, in the presidential cycle that's coming up, I mean, at this stage, it's a run for who grabs the most money. It's not about getting votes. which is really, so counterproductive to everything, because now what you're doing is you're being vetted by a certain class of people who can write all kinds of checks and have their own selfish interests involved in getting somebody elected, not necessarily for the benefit of the whole country.
Yeah, are we creating here a little fiefdom?
It'd be fine if it was a little fiefdom.
Well, you're right. Okay, yeah, you're right. It's a big one.
Yeah, I mean, when you hear people, brag that they're going to put $900 million into the election, you've got to stand back and scratch your head. I mean, you're going to pay for screwy, advertising and whatever to get somebody elected, not necessarily where they even tell you what they stand for.
Yeah, well, that seems to be not important at this point anymore. It's what the other person supposedly stands for and all the bad things that other person stands for. That's where we end up going, and we all sit here going, I don't know anything about any of these people other than all this supposed bad stuff that the other person has told me about. And that's not being of service to the people either. The media is not being of service because we're not hearing what we need to hear. The information isn't out there for us.
Right. And if you think about it, part of the income that comes into all the media is from these political campaigns. I don't know who else it goes to.
Yeah, all these super PACs and the funds, and then $900 million just comes from two people. That's scary because there's a whole lot of other corporations and very wealthy people out there more than willing to put that kind of money in. And then we all sit out here going, well, hey, my $50 isn't really going to make a difference, is it?
No, and you shouldn't have to put $50 in. You should be able to vote on the people up or down for what they stand for, not for how much money they raise or how slick their commercial may be. It really should be what they intend to do, what their vision is for doing that job.
Yeah, all right. We'll continue this discussion on the other side of the break here on America Now. Stay with us. All right, everybody, welcome back. Talking about being of service tonight, and it's something I think that most of us have built in. A parent's love for a child, where you're willing to sacrifice whatever's necessary to protect and help keep them safe. For family members, or when you have a friend who's just down and out or hurting or whatever. Most of us are there. We're there for the other person. Even people we don't know, we see someone having a hard time on the street or in a store. I know my inclination is I want to be there for them. It's natural. But it seems, John, a lot of these psychopaths and sociopaths that seem to end up right now in leadership roles in this country don't seem to have that innate ability.
Well, because for some reason they've taken on the mantra of, he who has the most toys at the end wins, I guess. and if you think too about this royalty kind of thing going on in D.C. and that is that they're competing with these other people who have all this money and they're trying to be just like them. I mean, if you think back in like 1960 with JFK, I mean, he was he came from a really wealthy family, but that was kind of an anomaly. It was not, that they were all hanging out in that kind of world. But today that has become more and more, common. They may pay salaries to the congressmen of $175,000 or $174,000 a year, but they're getting money from all other sources that they're doing all kinds of other stuff. I just saw here with the local congressman I have, all of a sudden he's getting jammed up for going, to the Middle East, on the dime of some oil company. I mean, it's like, what? We come from farm territory.
Wow, yeah. Well, and even your governor, I mean, I saw recently about how much he charges for his snacks and food. I shouldn't crack up this much, but I just have this image of him there with, okay, all the food.
Well, the man when he was U.S. attorney, he got called to the carpet in front of the Congress, actually, because of his expense accounts. You know, I worked for government. We would have to take a government rate if we went to stay someplace. He finagled it somehow where he was all in 4-star hotels. He wasn't living at the government rate. And it's like, you know, he's a public servant. You're not supposed to be going into the penthouse.
Yeah, exactly, you know, and that's the whole thing, you know, it's all about, you know, being, if you're really a good public servant, you know, they have to have integrity, and they have to have the willingness to do the right thing, especially when nobody's looking. That's the big difference, you know. A lot of them seem to want to pose for the pictures, kiss the baby, supposedly help the little old lady across the street or whatever, you know, as long as, the press is there and they can get the press for it, get the pictures and all of that. But you know what? They need to be challenging themselves to be doing better. They really need to remember that, you know, this is a way of life, that it's not something that is just, you just do a little something good here and there. This is something that you start walking this walk and it becomes your way of life, being of service. And again, it's a very different path than a lot of people, especially in high positions, unfortunately seem to do. Now, that's not to take away from those who are generous and giving to others, whether they get the press or not.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, I think what we're talking about is the people that start seeing this as some, you know, road to riches. I mean, they should be having a book out, you know, get elected and, you know, become wealthy. I mean, and that would probably be fine. I don't know, maybe in the Soviet Union that worked really well if you moved up far enough in the Red Party or whatever. But that really was never the goal here. And when you look in history, you know, in our history, you know, some of these, you know, our presidents, some of them have really had tough lives, and, you know, they gave their all for whatever it is. And those were the ones that really changed the country. They didn't keep the status quo. They took the hard path. They made the tough choices, not the easy choices. But today, I mean, it's supposed to be some, you know, don't make waves, just find a way to get as much money as you possibly can.
You know, and I think another thing, too, that really bothers me, think of all those who have served this country in the armed forces. You know, they do it. They give of themselves. And yet, many times they come back to a country that does not appreciate them, that turns its back on them, and we still have that problem. You know, yes, we honor them as they go over there and we appreciate them, but they come home and they don't find the support that they need when they come back home. They can't find the jobs. They can't find the mental health support that they so desperately need so many times for the PTSD that they suffer from. You know, where's the support there? We need to remember that so many people offer themselves willingly out of love for them, you know, for their families, for this country, and we need to remember to be in service back to them as well.
Oh, absolutely. You mean a parade isn't enough?
Oh, gee, I forgot about those, yeah.
I mean, as long as a politician gets to walk down the path, the center of the street, and then, you know, nod his head so you'll vote for him again. I mean, just, you know, in the last, you know, 15 years, I mean, 2001, they were really hot to send everybody over. You know, we're gonna go do a war. We're gonna support everybody. And then when they're coming home, you know, the waiting lines at the veterans hospitals are tremendous. And you know, they had those poor soldiers where they were doing 5 and 6 tours in a crazy environment. I mean, nobody had the political will to say, you know what, you can't send somebody 5 and 6 times. Perhaps they had to, you know, put the draft back in place. But, you know, nobody would stand up and make it some kind of practical way to do this.
Exactly. That's the whole point of this. It's stand up. Speak up. Even if you're just one. Who cares? Do the right thing, even if other people seem to be doing the wrong thing.
I mean, again, you know, my state has become almost the poster child for what not to do.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we've got a governor who's, you know, tearing at the police all the time, you know, because they're in a union. I mean, it's, you know, and teachers, they're in a union so that they want, you know, a decent, you know, standard of living or something, but, you know, they're getting too much. It's like, I don't know if you've ever been in the schools, but I did a lot of stuff in the schools over a 5-year time period. That is not an easy job.
No, I know, yeah, I was in the school system at the college level, but still, I know others who teach and have had to walk away from it. This is their passion, this is their love, this was the way they wanted to be in service. But there's no money in it. They weren't doing it for the money, but for God's sakes, you got to get enough that you can at least survive. And I'm talking about bare minimum survival, not have a really nice house and fancy cars and all that. This was just basic needs, for heaven's sakes.
Right, and here the big exploiting mantra was that they only work 9 months a year and all of that stuff, and they only have from 7 to 3 or whatever, but they're up till 10 or 11 o'clock at night doing everything else they need to do. And, people like that should be appreciated. And I think the thing that disgusts me, and I use that word genuinely, is that, a political leader is never supposed to do that to a group of people. That is not leadership. Leadership is being kind and empowering and giving a vision and a direction, not tearing at people. I mean, there's been societies in the last 100 years or so that were very good at tearing at populations. Yeah,
unfortunately, they were. All right, we're going to continue this discussion on being of service here on America Now. All right, everybody, welcome back. John Higgins and I talking about being of service tonight. And John, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it probably about best. You don't need to be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love to serve.
Yes. I mean, I don't know if you've seen these things on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, where they give, a homeless guy like $100, and they think he's going to go buy liquor with it or whatever. He goes and he buys food and he gives it to everybody else who doesn't have anything.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the takers, and that's why that's all got to be changed. You got to stop that dialogue, The ones that are preaching so much about the people living off the government are the ones that are in fact living off the government, just at the higher level, not at the poverty level. They're getting all kinds of grants and tax benefits and grants and all these things, and they'll be jealous that the guy down at the bottom is getting food stamps.
Yeah, isn't that amazing though? And I think about it, most of us, you and I and my producer James, we were all talking about this just, during the break here, about how, you give. Sometimes you give till it hurts, and it hurts you, because you give what you have, because others you love and care about, you want to give to them, and it's true. Most people in America do this, but our leaders have a very different way of going about giving. They give to one another their support and stuff until, oh wait, hey, maybe I can take this from you because then I can have this or this or this. It's really so warped. But when you think about it, John, the whole modern world feeds our egos and demands we compare ourselves to one another. We compete with one another. And sadly, this leads to the feelings of the unworthiness, the less than, and the contempt for others. And at a certain level, people who have to constantly be taking from others, I really feel sorry for them. They don't understand compassion. They don't understand love. They don't understand anything close to this.
Right, and they end up basically being alone or surrounded by a bunch of people who really don't care about them at all. They yes them to death because that's where their paycheck is, and they wind up, in a very terrible spot. I mean, I feel badly about the whole Michael Jackson thing. I mean, he had some screwball doctor giving him, Topafol or something, because he couldn't sleep. I mean, a normal doctor would have said, we don't do that. But, since he was hanging around with a celebrity, it was like he would do crazy stuff. Or, as you and I have discussed at different times, like Howard Hughes sitting there, in a hotel room, fingernails growing, scared to death of germs.
Yeah, or as James mentioned, William Randolph Hearst. I mean, look at the families. What happens to these families? It's like the money curses them. You know, they so love it and idolize the money that they've really, you hate to say it, but it's the golden calf for them. And the universe, source, God, whatever you want to call it, there is a higher karma to all of this stuff. And you worship money over everything else, and it's going to come back to bite you.
Well, I think we have a great example here, too. I think it's the Menendez brothers, not the senator, but the two boys who grew up in the Princeton area. You know, they offed their parents so they could get their inheritance faster. I mean, you know, it's a dog-eat-dog kind of savage, you know, lifestyle that it becomes. And I often think that it's almost sociopathic because, you know, if you have empathy for other people, you're not trying to take advantage of people.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the whole point. You're not trying to take advantage, and you're not also trying to be recognized for, hey, look at me, I just gave so-and-so, you know, $1 million, and good for me. Well, in one way, yes, good. You are giving. This is true. There's no harm in that. It is a form of giving, as I mentioned way back when we started all of this. But, you know, you're not really becoming free at that point. You've enslaved yourself to money.
And what happens is that you start worshiping money, and then you start losing sight of what your purpose here is. And, you know, most of those people that I see, they never have enough. You know, they're always trying to keep up with the other people that are in their you know, cadre, and you know, there's no amount of, you know, things that you can buy if you're hollow inside.
No, there isn't. Things don't fill you. Nothing from the outside fills you. Nothing. It comes from within. And at that point, when you can get to that stage, then boy, you've got everything to give.
Right, and sometimes I think a lot of the giving is just because of the guilty conscience. I don't necessarily, you know, think that it's all altruistic. I mean, the Catholic Church obviously found a great way of dealing with that in the Middle Ages. They would sell, what was it, repentances, or I can't think of the term, and you know they would shorten your time in purgatory.
Yes.
They had a good marketer going on there.
Well, that's the problem. Good marketers and all of this, you know. That's it. You know, we were being led to believe there's a certain way of being of service here, and it's very different from where we need to be, and especially our leaders. But in the past, you know, when we've had these types of problems where the corporations rise up and the companies and all of this get too big, and the trusts and the monopolies and all of this, we've been able to break this up before. We need to do it again.
Yeah, but that was basically due that we had some really good leaders that would come up. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, I mean, he was a trust buster. I mean, he kind of fouled them up. They thought by putting him in as vice president, they'd neutralize him. They didn't, you know, count on McKinley getting shot. And once Teddy Roosevelt was in, that's the end of the trust. I mean, because you couldn't BS the man, you know. He could not be bought, and he couldn't be, you know, scammed. And, you know, he was... You know, most people don't know he was one of the greatest presidents we had. He set up the National Park Service and all of those kinds of things. He was, you know, he was a very forward-thinking man, and he really believed that we needed to have some sense of equalization, that the country can't function with that kind of separation in terms of incomes.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And don't forget teddy bears. Hey, I'm good with that. Oh, dear. But, yeah, no, you know, really. No, it's true, though. You know, it's been rare when we've really had these great leaders rise up and say, you know what? You know, you can't buy me. That's not why I'm here. I know what my purpose is and why I've been placed in this position. And it's, you have to wonder if the universe didn't also have a play in that with McKinley getting shot, put Roosevelt in there. Something higher kind of took over and said, you know what, this is not good. And I'm kind of sitting here waiting, like, come on, universe, come on through. We need a big change in this country right now. And I honestly believe it's going to happen. We're going to shift this.
Well, I do believe it, too, because, what you and I talk about, a lot of people are starting to talk about, and I think that the volume of all of that is getting louder because, people aren't buying this thing of, hating one another because you're in a different group from one another. It's like we're all basically in the same boat. And this, ploy that gets used to, divide and conquer is not going to continue to work. And, we are a democracy, and the vote is what counts at the end of the day. And we can vote these people out, and that's eventually what we have to do, and hold them accountable. You can't be promising something, in the primary and then pivot to a whole other position. I mean, what it makes it sound like it's a game of Twister.
It has become that, hasn't it? Yeah, we need them to just stand up and say, good morning, or, good afternoon, or whatever. How can I be of service?
Right. I mean, maybe we've got to get rid of the primary thing. I don't know, because it's, unfortunately not the general population votes in the primaries, and it's feeding in all of these, weird positions and people that are playing to a far left or a far right and not what they really need to do to run the country.
Yeah, well, here's hoping we figure out how to be of service, and I think most of us need to stay the course because it will get better.